The plan is just to, maybe we'll do just a few minutes breathing meditation to start off. And the topic I've chosen for later is it's about the self. It's more on the emptiness side of the teaching, self, and looking at how the I exists using the 6 elements. So it's quite an interesting one. Okay, so let's just begin by doing some breathing meditation just for a few minutes. Okay, so we just begin by consciously bringing our attention inwards. That means looking into our body, feeling what's happening with our body, and also just checking what's going on in the mind. You also spend a moment just appreciating the great opportunity we have to be able to come together, do some practice together, and study the incredible teachings of the Buddha together. Our motivation is not purely to benefit ourselves, but benefit those around us, and also ultimately the Mahayana motivation to benefit all sentient beings, all living beings. And we just always start with the body, just scanning, making sure that our body is, the spine is straight. Main thing is to be relaxed and have a comfortable posture. Sitting on the floor or the cushion, or can even be lying down. All we're doing is bringing our attention to the breathing, which is already happening. We're just now taking notice of it without having to change it or judge it. Good to begin just focusing more on the out breath as we breathe out with each out breath, any tension in the body, any distractions in the mind, have a sense of relaxing. And just giving all our attention to the breath. Could be at the nostrils, could be lower down at the abdomen, rising and falling, or could be just watching the whole body moving with each breath. And while we're watching the breath, part of the mind is also just checking, monitoring what we're doing, called introspection. Just seeing whether we've been distracted, if we've gone off to a different time or place with a thought. If we notice that, we gently let go of that distraction, come back to the breath. Staying with the breath, full flow of the in-breath, full flow of the out-breath. Okay, thanks. Okay, so this practice is partly from the book How to Meditate by Kathleen MacDonald. I think it's called How the I Appears. And it's also partly based on a meditation in Discovering Buddhism materials in, I think it's the module How to Meditate. It's the practice looking at the 6 elements that make up what they call the aggregates, the body and mind. So it comes on the emptiness side of the practice, or wisdom. So basically, we can classify all the Lama teachings into either compassion practices, compassion teaching, or wisdom teachings, compassion, loving kindness, and so on, bodhicitta. And wisdom is the looking at how things exist, how the self, our view of ourselves exists, and how the physical world exists, and particularly aimed at trying to realize what they call the wisdom realizing emptiness. Nothing, including ourselves, has any inherent concrete existence. Everything's relative. So this practice is particularly looking at how the self exists, how our idea of ourselves exists. So just a little quote from Lama Yeshe in one of his books called When the Chocolate Runs Out. Wonderful little book of quotes from Lama Yeshe's teaching. And he's talking about our idea of the self, which is, for most of us, fairly, the appearance, if we look at how the appearance of self is, it seems to be that there is something very definite there. But when we analyze, look deeper, dig down, we can't actually find anything that we can hold on to and say this is something that is truly existent, that is concrete. And so this is the practice to help realize how mistaken we are. So this instinctive grasping or holding on to this idea that we exist solidly. It's very, it doesn't just happen overnight, it happens, we've had it from birth and we've had it from infinite number of previous lives. So it's something, what they call the ignorance of not understanding how we exist. So this is what Lama Zopa said, quite simply, ego, so he's taught this is the same thing as self. Ego is a mistaken conception that yourself is independent, permanent, and inherently existing. In reality, what you believe to be the I doesn't exist. It's important to look closely at this belief and see it for yourself as a hallucination, not founded in reality. But what you believe is very powerful and wrong. Wrong beliefs very effectively perpetuate wrong views. Often people seem to think that if you aren't one with your ego, if you don't have a sense of ego, then you can't have a life or get a job or do anything. You think that if you lose your ego, you lose your personality, your mind, and your human nature. That's a dangerous delusion, that you can't separate ego from your mind, ego from your life. Please don't worry about that. If you see through the delusion of ego, you'll actually be very happy, and happy in a way that's not dependent on causes and conditions. So then he just goes on to just explain that ego is a mental concept, not a physical thing, but the symptoms of ego and how it acts can manifest externally, such as when we get angry. The person who's angry, his face and body reflect the angry vibration. But the expression on his face and the posture of his body are not anger itself, they're just symptoms of anger. Similarly, ego is not its external manifestation, but a mental factor, a psychological attitude. You can't see it from the outside. When you perceive the hallucination of the self-existent, independent I, you immediately accept the existence of the other. That other then appears to be totally separate from you. If there was no I, there would be no appearance of other. But this imagined projected separateness is the source of all the suffering of the world and of samsara. The concept of ego is our biggest problem, the king of problems. Other emotions are like ministers, but ego is the king. When you reach beyond ego, the cabinet of other delusions disappears. It's a very interesting analogy, looking at like a government, the prime minister or the president being ego, and then all the other problems, anger, attachment, so on, follow on from that delusion. So just finally, he says, our ego might cheat us by projecting its own hallucinated view of reality, and we then judge good, bad on the basis of this hallucination. So our ego paints a wrong projection on the object, and attachment follows without hesitation. Okay, so the actual meditation, we start off just by seeing how ego appears right now when we're sitting on the cushion. Can we actually have a sense of self? Often, if we're trying to find this sense of self, even though it's lurking in the background behind everything we do and think, it's quite hard to find it. So it's said that if we think of a time when we were either angry or very proud, when we're feeling that we've strong sense of self, then the ego can tend to arise. Also being criticized. So when we feel angry or praised or even scared, life-threatening situation, that sense of ego can I nearly died, I was so scared. So you can actually feel it arising. So we can just bring to mind something that caused that sense of self to arise, and just then we're going to sort of analyze, does that self, can we find it? Can we find it in the body? or can we find it in the mind? And then we move with the body. We can just check the physical composition of the body. We know it consists of organs and skin and bones and so on. So if we can find the self somewhere, often we point to our chest when we talk about me. Can we find anything that's actually a self there? And then we start to analyze the 6 elements that make up the body and mind. These 6 elements are said to be earth element, fire element, water element, air or wind element. And then the non-physical ones are space between things. And the last one is consciousness. So that's just another way of breaking down what they call the aggregates, the physical and mental collection of this thing we call ourselves, collection of body and mind. We start looking at each one of those, particularly. So we go through the earth element, and we look at the external earth element, features of it. But this is, the outside world, the walls of the room we're in, the physical objects, the mountains, plant world, things growing. And then we look at how the inner sensation of that. So the inner sensation is the feeling of our body, our bones, the things that make up our physical body. And then we look at the connection between the outer earth element and the inner earth element. And that connection is the food we eat. We take in food, which is grown in the earth, and then we digest it, releases energy. And so that earth element becomes part of our inner earth element. And then the last thing we do is just say, can we find anything in the earth element that is me, that I can identify? This is mine, this is the self. We just ask that question and see whether we can find the self, which of course, Lama Zopa, the great teachers, it doesn't exist. So it's a way of just digging down and just checking the accuracy of this first impression we have of a real self using each of the elements. So we step by step go through each element, earth, water, wind, and fire, etc. Then we come to consciousness, and then we ask ourselves, well, if we can't really find this strong sense of an independent self there, can it be somewhere outside, floating outside the body and mind? See whether that's possible. And so it's a series of questions we ask. And as Lama Zopa says, the conclusion, if we're correct, will come to just to quote what he says, the I is not the body. There's no I or self inside the body. Our body is not the self, nor is the mind, nor is the I inside the mind, nor is it because this collection of body and mind together is not the self, but the I exists by designate, by concept, by imputations to be imputed on the aggregates. So the great quotation that sums it all up is by Nagarjuna, great Indian master, who says that a person is not earth, not water, not fire, not wind, not space, not consciousness, and not all of them. What person is there other than these? That's the question. And that question is one that we just ponder. Okay, so it's poetry and very deep. So that's kind of the introduction. Any questions before we start? There's only one person there. Does it sort of is it a familiar meditation at all, Shayla?
Yes, but okay, so can we go back to consciousness really quick? So yeah. The I is not found in the consciousness?
No, the I is not found in the consciousness. So remember, it's the I that is something that we can hold on to, that exists concretely. So the two things to avoid in the whole meditation are the two extremes, they call it. First of all, that there is this very concrete I. That's what we're trying to undermine. And the opposite is that there's no I at all. There's no self. So that's called nihilism. So it's what we're left is that the emptiness of the I. So there's certainly somebody who's sitting meditating. There's somebody who gets up in the morning and goes to work and so on. But it's not this instinctive, concrete, Lama Yeshe says, this ego. As Lama Zopa says, it's a designation, like a concept that's placed on top of all the experiences of body and consciousness. And that's the realization. By actually having that realization, if we actually have it in a very profound way, we become an enlightened being. If we can have it all the time, not just when we're meditating. So it's possible as we make progress, we can come to the actual practice is to just loosen, because it's such an incredibly strong delusion or hallucination, as Lama Yeshe said, something that we have to work with, gradually chip away at. And so it's said that just by doing this sort of meditation, where we doubt, just to have the doubt forms cracks in this instinctive conviction that there is something very solid there that we've been carrying around for so long. Just by forming cracks in that and doubting it, questioning it, is said to be incredibly powerful. And Lama Zopa says it sort of undermines the basis of samsara and our suffering. So when we get to conscious, we actually look at what all the different things that we notice when we're actually doing our mindfulness meditation. Sometimes we're thinking about what happened yesterday, what's going to happen later. Sometimes we're in an up mood. Sometimes we're in a angry or mood, or might be in a depressed mood. So there's this stream of consciousness, but we can't actually say that any of those momentary consciousnesses, one moment of consciousness causing the next, is the self. It's ever changing. But that's when we come to a consciousness, we look at all the different aspects. So is this I the happy I? Is this I the anxious I? Is this? So we just ask ourselves questions. By asking questions, it helps to sort of doubt all our assumptions about its concrete self. So it's what Lama Zopa says, we crack the foundations of samsara that causes all our suffering by just analysing and looking at how self exists. Okay, everything, is that okay? Yep. All right, so we'll just start by practice. Just get myself organised. And we'll have time for a bit of discussion later. Okay, so we'll just come back to that mindfulness of the breath for a few moments. Just settling the mind on the movement of the breath, calming the mind. So we can just start our practice on how the I appears to exist, and using the 6 elements to analyze the self, the I. Just quoting Nagarjuna's profound verse: a person is not earth, not water, not fire, not wind, not space. not consciousness, and not all of them. What person is there other than these? So we just begin by just asking, checking to see if we can get a sense of who it is that is now sitting on the cushion, on the chair, doing the meditation session. We get a sense of somebody here, sense of me, looking at we know there's a body here, but we're looking at something beyond that. Sense of self. Sometimes it helps to recall situations where we've been criticized or we've been praised or we feel scared, our life's in danger, for that sense of self to come up. A strong sense of self, and we just see if we can feel that sense of self, become aware of it. So then, with that feeling of self, we look closely now, we analyze if we can actually find how that self exists. We investigate. Starting first with the body. The body, there's certainly a body here, comprising organs, the brain, human body, the cells of the body, atoms that make up the cells, the air in the body, the blood running through the body, so in this body made of parts, see if we can actually find this I that we hold on to. Is it in the brain? Is it in the abdomen? Can we locate any particular organ? Perhaps it's just somehow in the whole body. A little bit of self is, it's in the whole body. So just look at that and see, is that, if it's in the whole body, when we lose part of the body, we lose part of ourselves. Every day our cells are being regenerated, we're losing cells, and then generating new cells, losing parts of our hair, our nails, our skin. If we lose parts of our body, say if we lose an arm or a leg, does that mean that we've lost part of ourselves? So you can see, if we identify the self with the body, there are problems, logistical problems. So then we look now at the elements of the body, the 6 elements. 6 elements being earth, water, fire, air, then there's space and consciousness. So just going through each one, seeing if we can find this I or the self in any of the individual elements. The earth element, it has the quality of resistance, solidity. In the body, it would be the bones, the flesh, teeth, the organs, the food we ingest. The outer aspect of the earth element is the physical world outside, the room, the objects, the buildings, the city around us, the mountains, the plants. The connection between our inner earth element and outer, only through ingesting food, taking food that's grown in the earth. From the moment we're born, we're taking in food, mother's milk. We're ingesting the food. The connection between the earth element, inner and outer, is through food. Processing the food, taking the energy from the food, excreting the waste food back to the earth. Can we find anything that we could call the self in the earth element? Something we can say, this is mine, this is the I. Secondly, look at the water element as the nature of being wet, liquid, flowing. The aspect of the water element is the blood, the saliva, the sweat, mucus, urine, the lymph, the liquid constituents of the body. The outer water element, the water we drink from the tap, the rivers, lakes, and oceans, the rain that falls, the moisture in the clouds, the connection between the inner and outer water element. It's when we drink the water, drink liquids, and then we breathe out water vapor, we sweat, excrete excess water back to the earth. Can we find anything in the water element that is the self? Something we can hold on to, say, this is mine, exclusively, this is me. The fire element has the nature of energy or heat, including electrical energy. The inner fire element is our body warmth, which is generated from digesting the food. Also the nervous system, which is powered by electrical currents generated in the body. The outer aspect of fire is the sun, the heat and light. The sun generates warmth in the world and grows plants that we eat, grows the food. The connection is when we eat the food, generate the energy from the food, releases heat. Also, we can absorb the heat directly from the sun. heat from our heating appliances. And then we radiate the heat back from our body. This is the fire element. Outer and inner aspects. Can we find anything in the fire element that we can hold on to? Say, this is the self. This is mine. Then we come to the wind element. Air flows in and out of our body as we breathe, fills the lungs, dissolves into the blood, transforming the oxygen to carbon dioxide, which we breathe out. Connection every moment as we breathe between the inner element of air and the outer element. Can we find anything in the air element that we can hold on to and say, this is me, this is the self, this is mine. The space element, what's between the objects, space between our lungs, the cavities in the body, space between the cells and the atoms making up the body. Externally, distance between objects, distance between planets, stars, galaxies, in the universe. Can we find anything in the space element, inner and outer, that is exclusively ours, that is mine, that this is me? How finally the consciousness element, non-physical, making rising the mind, stream of consciousness that we experience when we meditate. The thoughts, images, memories that flash through the mind. Feelings in the mind, the emotions, happy mind, sad mind, neutral mind. Each moment of consciousness caused by a previous moment of consciousness. That caused by a previous moment of consciousness. That this infinite chain of causes of consciousness, going back without beginning, going forward without end, stream of consciousness. Can we find anything in the stream of consciousness that we can say, this is self, unchanging, solid, something we can hold on to? And yet, we can come back to this feeling that there is somebody or something here, sitting, meditating now. I am meditating. I am hot, I am cold, I am bored. We can say that. What does it mean? Thinking, what is this self? Can itself be something outside the body and mind? Is this plausible? Self can be something hovering above the aggregates, the physical collection, the mental collection, and so on. So as Lama Zopa says, the solid sense of self has never existed. It has been empty from beginning of time. Create the root of samsara by holding on to the hallucination that there is this solid me, independent causes and conditions. In fact, this I exists independence on the aggregates, on causes and conditions, imputed on the ever-changing physical and mental aggregates, elements of the body and mind. The more we analyze, says Lama Zopa, on how the way the I exists, we see it exists dependently. And we can relax this grasping, holding onto the I. We can let go of the I. Let go of the delusions. Crack the foundations of samsara by letting go of these delusions. This delusion. So then we come back to the sense of self sitting on the cushion, on the chair that we had at the beginning of the practice. Is there any loosening of that sense, any doubting, any letting go of the sense of a solid soul? Coming back to Nagarjuna's quote, a person is not earth, not water, not fire, not wind, not space, not consciousness, and not all of them. What person is there other than these? Okay, so that's the actual practice on how the I exists, looking at how the self exists and using the 6 elements. So anything that you'd like to discuss, you're welcome. So
Hello.
Yep. Sorry, I'm still here.
Oh, no, sorry. I'm just trying to focus my thoughts. So when you talk about, you were talking about I am anger. Was it anger? I am depressed.
Yeah, we have looking at the different emotions we experience. Like sometimes we feel I'm depressed today, or I'm really happy today, I'm elated, I'm anxious. So you're using that sort of I and then connecting it with an emotion. So can we, by just noticing if there's an I that is unchanging in a way or a solid, how can it be? Which one is it? Is it the happy I, happy self, depressed self? Can we? If it's all, it can't be all. It can't be unchanging if it's having these different experiences. Basically, so I think what the logic is.
Okay.
Yeah. So we can't pin it down, saying, well, you know, I must be. If I'm always, if I'm changing, our moods change from time to time. So we can't actually say that's me. If we accept the idea that the self is something that we label on top of this ever changing river of thoughts, emotions, and so on, but it's not actually fixing on any particular part of it. That's beginning. That's like realizing the first stage of emptiness. Okay, so it's impermanent. The river consciousness idea helps me quite a bit. When you're looking at a river, it looks like that's the same thing all the time. But if you look deeper, it's actually every second there's millions of different molecules and atoms of water flowing past, and so it's never the same river. So that's what the idea of something eternal is. The thing that we tend to sort of Lama Yeshe says this thing that's driven us to be in samsara, because we're holding on so tight to this something, and by having this sense that there's something solid here, it creates the other. So there's something out there. There's somebody. The sense implied is that we don't need to look after ourselves at the expense of the other. So that's where he says all the this, that, like, dislike, friend, enemy, and stranger, all that sort of stuff, that dualistic thinking, he calls it. That's where the problems arise from. But by letting go of that, so there's certainly there's something here that I label self, but it's actually just something that I can't hold on to. It's just changing from moment to moment. But I agree that we can sort of, the physical side, I think it's quite easy to let go, because we know that our body changes from day to day. We know that at the time of death, we're going to have to leave the body. But the mind is harder to get that sense of impermanence and ever-changingness. And then the other thing that I used to hook on to quite a bit was, well, it's got to be the whole lot altogether. But it as the question that Nagarjuna says, can we find, it's not all of these, but is there any I that's not this? So it leaves you the question. It's very hard to say what it is, but we know what it's not. It's not this sort of solid sense. So they call the emptiness meditation non-affirming negative. I think that's the logistical explanation. So you're not actually saying that there's anything definitely there, but you're saying what it's not. It's merely empty. Lama Zopa always uses the word merely, just empty. It's all it is. It's something that doesn't have this concrete inherent existence. And that's the big mistake that our mind has made from infinite lives right up until now. And that's what we're trying to dig away at. Okay? There's something there. But just realize that if we actually do the meditation properly, we'd be Buddha. So it's going to be slow. we can, as Lama Zopa says, just by crack the foundations by doing the meditation often enough, and just sow the seeds of doubt about this presumption. The Dalai Lama, when he just says, when we appear to be very solid and concrete, existing here, but when we investigate, we can't find this solid me, this solid sense of Alan, or it's just something that's hovering there. And it wouldn't matter if it was just philosophy, but as Lama Yeshe says, it's the beginning, it's our downfall, because we're holding on to that so strongly, instinctively, that we have all these delusions about the other person, me, the friend, the nice person who helps me, the person who doesn't, that dualistic way of thinking. Yeah. It's a sort of it's a work in progress. As long as we're alive, we'll still be pondering the emptiness teachings, unless, of course, we get enlightenment this lifetime, which would be really lucky to. Fantastic. And bodhisattvas have got so much progress that they've actually worked so much on analyzing or working on giving themselves to others that they just lose this holding on to the sense of self. And that's why the teaching said it's a very difficult thing to realize emptiness, but we can realize compassion, and we can practice compassion. The good heart is sort of the way to deal to the way into Buddhahood. Because by forgetting ourselves and working for others, we're actually on the path to realizing emptiness in another way. So that's why I think most of the teachers emphasize having the good heart as being the main point. That's what the Dalai Lama always says. You cannot be Buddha. You don't have to worry about religion. He says, by just having a good heart, being a good person, you're actually doing the Buddhist practices without even being aware of. So, amazing how quickly the hour goes. So if there's nothing else, I thought I'd just read Lama Zopa's dedication, which I usually read at the end of each session, particularly dedicated to the pandemic. So we contemplate beings who are sick, but also covers things like wars, famines, and catastrophes, and so on. So it's very powerful. Okay, so we'll just finish with that one. However many sick sentient beings there are, may they quickly be freed from all sickness. May all the sickness, without exception, of all transmigrating beings never occur again. May all wars, sickness, famine, torture, poverty, all economic problems in the world, and all dangers of earth, water, fire, and wind be pacified immediately. May perfect peace and happiness prevail in everyone's hearts and lives. May the Buddha Dharma last a long time, and may sentient beings in the world meet the Buddha Dharma and achieve enlightenment as quickly as possible. Dedicated to that. Okay, so that's it for today, or tonight. It's night there, I think, isn't it? Yeah. So thanks so much for being there. Thanks for being there, Dani. I noticed you're there. Someone joined in. And thanks, Shayla, for being there, coordinating. So have a great day and a great week, and I look forward to seeing you next week, same time.